We're not expecting the fire alarm to sound this afternoon. If the alarm does go off, please leave the building by the nearest available exit. The assembly point is on the green in front of SK House. I'd like to begin by welcoming all councillors and officers and members of the press and public who are joining our meeting today. I would also draw your attention to the fact that the meeting is being recorded. Any councillor who wishes to speak should press the button on their microphone. A green light will signal that you are in the queue. I will call councillors to speak in the order in which they appear on the list. Please do not press your button again if your light is green. This will take you out of the queue. When it is your turn to speak, I will call your name and the Democratic Service team will ensure your microphone is live. They will also turn your microphone off when you have finished speaking. You will not be able to turn your own microphone on or off. This will be done for you. The button on your microphone will only allow you to join or remove yourself from the list of councillors requesting to speak. Members are also reminded that when speaking, comments should be addressed through the chairman and members should speak clearly into their microphones. Members are also reminded that when the chairman starts speaking, you are to stop speaking and be seated. The length of time for speeches remains 5 minutes. You'll be warned when you have 30 seconds left and your time is up. There is a recorded vote for recommendations 1 to 11 in the Budget Proposals Report. For the remainder of the recommendations in that report, plus the remaining business on the agenda, I have requested that we use the voting buttons. Please be aware that these electronic votes are not a recorded vote, but the Democratic Services team will have access to the results after the meeting to know how each member voted for these items. The only other occasions we would be using a roll call vote will be if a recorded vote is requested on any other item. The rules of debate are set out in the Constitution, but here is a brief reminder. A member may speak once on motions and once on each amendment that is put. Other than exercising a right of reply at the end of debate on a substantive motion or an amendment, the only time a member may speak a second time is to raise a point of order, point of information or point of personal explanation. Points of order may only relate to an alleged breach of the council procedure rules or the law. Any councillor who wishes to raise a point of order must indicate the rule or law and the way in which they consider it has been broken. A point of information provides any councillor with the ability to intervene should they believe another councillor is providing the council with incorrect information, thereby saving the council from being misled and saving its time. A point of personal explanation may only relate to some material part of an earlier speech made by the councillor which may appear to have been misunderstood during debate. We will now begin to work our way through today's agenda. Agenda item 1, public open forum. I will ask the Democratic Service Manager to confirm whether any questions have been received from members of the public. James.
Thank you, Chairman. No questions or statements from the public today. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will move on to agenda item 2. Again, James, can I ask you to confirm any apologies that have been received for absence?
Thanks again, Chairman. I've got councillors Richard Cleaver, James Denniston, Ben Green, Jane Kingman, Paul Martin, Nick Robbins, Penny Robbins, Sue Sandall and Peter Stevens. I don't know whether there's any more apologies from the Chamber. Oh, actually, Councillor Kingman's here, so you can scrub that one. Thank you.
Did you realise that Councillor Kingman was here, James? Did I miss that? I thank you. We now move on to agenda item 3, disclosure of interests. Members are reminded that a disclosure of pecuniary interest should be declared in those circumstances whereby there is a direct impact relating to those items listed on their regular register of interests. For example, this would include employment, trade or profession, as well as any contracts or licences held with the council. This also includes any land owned or rented in the district by their member or their partner. Members should also consider whether they have any other registrable interests or non-registrable interests that would need declaring at the meeting in accordance with the Council Code of Conduct. Once you have declared an interest, you should leave the meeting, not speak or vote on the debate. You are entitled to speak in the same capacity as a member of the public in respect of other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, but must leave the chamber immediately after doing so. If any member has any interest that they need to disclose, could you please indicate now? Thank you. If during the debate it becomes clear that you have a disclosable pecuniary interest or any other interest in an item, you can declare it at the relevant point in the meeting. We will now proceed to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. This item is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of January 2025. Any corrections should be regarding the accuracy of the substance of the minutes, not typographical errors which should have been raised with the Democratic Services team when the minutes were published. If you wish to make any further corrections to the minutes, could you indicate that now, please? In that case, could I have a proposer for the minutes? Thank you, Councillor. And a seconder, and that's Councillor Bishnu Singh. We will now go to a vote for a show of hands. If you're in favour of accepting the minutes, please raise your hands. Yeah. Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you, Councillor. Those are approved. And we now... Oh, yes, Councillor... I'll get the right glasses on. Max, thank you. Sawyer?
Thank you, Chairman. Just for clarity, for electronic voting, will individual preferences be put in the public domain?
On request, yes. Sorry, I'm going to ask Graham to answer this one because he's telling me, so I thought I'd get him to say it rather than me parroting it. Graham?
Thank you, Chairman. Just for clarity, on any vote that is taken by the Council, whether it's electronic or by a show of hands, if any member wishes for their individual vote to be recorded in the minutes, at that stage you should report to the Council that that's what you wish, and we will ensure that that happens in the minutes. It won't be automatic, no.
Thank you, Councillor. Agenda item 5, communications, including my announcements. You will have had a list of the engagements I was privileged to attend on your behalf in the last 3 or 4 weeks. One that isn't on there is one that happened on Monday evening when I was invited to attend an event held in Stamford by Stamford Town Council, which was to mark the 3rd year of the war in Ukraine. I laid a wreath on behalf of the Council, and I'd just like to take a brief moment to just mention how moving it was for myself to be there with predominantly women from Ukraine who had relatives who were either still in Ukraine or actually had lost relatives due to the war there. It was a very moving occasion. It was a privilege to be there and a privilege to present yourselves with what I felt certain you would have felt more or less the same way as I did. So, thank you for the spontaneity, Councillor. Councillor Morgan?
Thank you. I would just like to suggest we have a minute's silence in view of all those who've lost their lives, if that's acceptable to the Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I did mention it to the Democratic Service prior to the meeting and then took the condition not to, but in view of what you have said, I believe that that could be appropriate. So could I ask you all to stand for a minute's silence? Thank you, councillors. I'm sure all our feelings are with the people of Ukraine. Could I now ask if there is anyone to make an announcement? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. I'm pleased to make a few announcements. First of all, art. We all support art. There is some art in my office. You're all welcome, councillors and officers, to go and have a look at the astonishing art in my office that was produced by a local artist based at the Union Street Gallery. It is one of the pieces in the Grantham as a Gallery rolling exhibition, which we hope will include vacant shop windows, other parts of the council and around the place. So I'm really pleased with what I've been lent. I've got to give it back at some point in my office, but also I hope we see more and more art by local artists scattered across the town of Grantham as a gallery, and indeed across the district. There are other artistic events, including the Whale. The Whale is arriving quite soon, funded by the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. We also have artists in residence in the four towns. Sorry, I'm hit by the light. The four towns over the next few weeks. So that's great. And I'm surprised that Father Craddock didn't mention the Turin Shroud, a replica of the Turin Shroud. It's been put on exhibition at St Wolfram's. I think it opens tonight, the exhibition, not the shroud, and lasts until May the 3rd next week. So go and have a look. It's not often you get to see such things. Secondly, the Deepings Leisure Centre, you will expect, and I don't know if any of you have got questions lined up about the Deeping Leisure Centre. I am, along with a lot of the, most of the community of the Deepings, I think, heartbroken that the discussions around the Deepings Leisure Centre have collapsed, for want of a better word. There were lots of players involved. It was always a very ambitious project. We have to say thank you enormously to all the community who have been involved in the campaign, particularly to the Community Interest Company, who I know all have spent hours, and particularly still to Councillor Moran, who in her spare time, not as a councillor, I hasten to add, but in her spare time has been working astonishingly well, trying to bring something together. Unfortunately, the school have let us down. I think that's the safe words to use. And so that part of the Deepings Leisure Centre project looks difficult from here. There may be bids from the school, there may be bids from other people in the Deepings, there may be other projects, either wet or dry leisure centre projects, and so we don't intend to make decisions about the £850,000 in reserves at this moment, because I still believe that there is a need for leisure facilities in the Deepings, and that at the time SKDC should repay its moral debt to the Deepings. But at the moment, the project that, as we first considered it, to reopen the centre that was closed by previous administration at this council, that is gone. It's a shame. So, shortlisting for awards, I should have had some notes with this, but I'm delighted to say that the council and members of staff at the council have been nominated for at least 5 awards. 2 of them are at the Employee Wellbeing Awards or something similar. Karen, I'm going to have to ask you to help me out with the detail.
Thank you, Leader. We've been shortlisted for 2 awards for the Local Government Chronicle, which is a national awards, one for Rising Star, which is our head of HR, Fran Beckett, which I think is a fabulous achievement to be shortlisted with 8 others nationally. And the other one is for the Building Control Partnership, which is the partnership between ourselves, Rushcliffe and Newark and Sherwood Council. So they're the national ones in June. We've also been shortlisted this week for 3 others, which is the Great Britain Workforce Awards, and that's Employer Engagement of the Year. So how we engage with our employees, our wellbeing group who look after our teams and do lots of things and keep us fit and healthy and mental health. And then also Fran Beckett has also been shortlisted in those awards, national awards as well, for Lead HR Manager of the Year as well.
So, thank you, Chief Executive. Thank you, Chair. I'm tempted to say something about local government reorganisation, but the better part of me says, no, let's leave that until the debate later in the council meeting, when all will be, well, not all will be revealed, certainly not all will be resolved, but we'll have an opportunity to talk about it later on. Thank you, Chair. I believe there are other announcements from Councillor Knowles and Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair, and good to see everybody once again. 3 brief announcements from me. A1 litter collection is due to start on Monday the 3rd of March. There were a few delays, but the contractor has now signed us off on working on the A1 safely while the road is being worked on. We were meant to start a little bit earlier, Chair. You will recall that from our previous meeting, but that was delayed. I'd like to congratulate our team led by Aisha Kirkham on the recent fly tipping prosecution. A successful £500 fixed penalty notice was reported. Full details in a recent press release on the 18th of February. I also want to thank members of the public for reporting that, and the team who are responsible in the background for investigating these crimes, the clean-up of these crimes, which, let's not forget, comes out of residents' ratepayers' money. We all want to see this blight wiped from our rural home. We do not want to see this happening, and it is beholden on all of us to help eradicate it. I'd also like, on that note, to encourage your members to review the 2024 Environmental Crime Report. Not only is this chaired by Aisha Kirkham, but SKDC are very strongly represented on the Lincolnshire Environmental Crime Partnership, showing the dedication we have to wiping these blights from our countryside. In light of that, I'm also delighted to announce that Fix My Street is now live for SKDC. This is an app that many of my county colleagues will all be very aware of, happy to use, very easy to use. It allows you to report issues in your area on your mobile phone as an app, nice and easily. You can now report fly tipping there, you can report dead animals, you can report broken streetlights and a whole host of other issues. So if I can ask all members to please publicise that to your local parishes, publicise that to people who contact you with difficulties, because it's a very easy, very quick way of reporting these issues, building up a file of how significant the issue is, and as always, the more we know about something and the earlier we know about it, the faster and cheaper it is to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Knowles.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very, very briefly, to draw your attention to a sheet that's been circulated to you on your desks. It gives a list of training that is planned for the new training year, and you'll note that some of the mandatory training has to be done again. It's got to be done each 12 months. And also alongside that, the Members Development Programme, there are quite a number of members not yet filled in the programme, and we very, very much welcome your cooperation in getting that filled in so that we can complete the work that is necessary to prepare for the training that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Unfortunately, Councillor Jewell, you're not allowed to make... No, you're not allowed, sir. Sorry. Before we move on to the main agenda items, I'd just all like to say that the motion on the agenda from Councillor Green has been withdrawn and won't be deferred. So we're now moving on to agenda item 6, budget proposals for 2025-2026 and indicative budgets for 2026 and 7 and 27 and 2028. This report represents the budget proposals and estimates for 2025-26 for the General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account, HRA, covering both revenue, capital expenditure. The Council is required to set a balanced budget and agree the level of council tax for 25-26. This report contains a summary of the proposals that have been considered for inclusion. We will be recommendations 1 to 11 are subject to a recorded vote, as will any proposed amendments for that section of the report. Could I invite the proposer for the recommendations, please, which I believe is Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. Before I begin, Chair, could I please ask that we relax for standing orders, as is traditional at this time of year, to allow me to go over the 5 minutes if absolutely necessary.
Yeah, that's been proposed, seconded. Could I have a vote on that, please? Thank you, that's carried. Oh, and also, sorry, Ashley, to interrupt again, as my Vice Chair has just demonstrated. Gentlemen, if you feel the need to remove your jackets, please do. Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. So, I've put these slides together. I'll try and press the buttons on both machines at the same time. So today, I'm pleased to present, after many weeks and months of preparation and scrutiny at the Environment Committee, at the Joint Budget Scrutiny Committee, at least 2, possibly more, meetings of Cabinet. We mentioned some of the fees and charges last month, so after lots of attention, I'm able to present this marvellous budget. I've asked the Chair of Finance and Economic Overview Scrutiny Committee to second the budget, and I'm happy that she's agreed to do that. So anything I miss, she'll pick up, I'm sure. But today, which button do I press? I'm going to resist the temptation to speculate about the elephant in the room, local government reorganisation. And when I say today, obviously I mean during this agenda item. We will deal with it later. So the headlines are council tax base was agreed at Cabinet of 50,140.5. I never understand where the 0.5 comes from. Council tax and budgeted costs and services are all within the pack. I'm sure you've all read every aspect of the budget pack, including the various appendices in detail. Obviously, the whole budget focuses on the contents of a corporate plan. We've set a corporate plan, that's what we plan to do. Everything that we should do should be able to link back to the objectives within the corporate plan. If you find something we're doing that doesn't, then we'll have a conversation, because either we need to change the plan, or more likely, we need to stop doing it. There's a corporate plan. I'm struggling to keep up with both at the same time. So that's where the number comes from. These figures, hot from the press, show what council tax you're likely to pay in Lincolnshire and in South Kesteven particularly, and you can see the numbers on the right hand side are approximations that we are taking the full amount of council tax available. We have decided that because if we don't take it this year, then it doesn't become available next year, and then you get that compound interest and missing out on charges. And we've had that discussion at the budget groups. The minimum revenue position, this is the money that we have to keep aside for the investments that we have made in St Martin's Park, which is obviously a legacy project that maybe many of the people involved wouldn't have done it that way if they had the chance again, but that's where we are. You have to work with what you've got to work with. And the depot also, which I'm pleased to say is on track for an opening of November. I'm going to say that confidently. We're confident that the wagons roll from the new site in November. What could possibly go wrong? So in the next couple of years, we will see budget pressures, which is another reason why we need to take the full amount this year, because the forecast, as you'll see in your pack, for the next couple of years is not as rosy as this year. We have a balanced budget this year. We intend to have balanced budgets in the year to come, but alerting you to these pressures. These are the proposed budget increases. They are on 2 different slides, and forgive me for not putting in the subtotal. You've got a calculator in your pocket, so do it yourself. So, Customer Service Centre down to graduate apprenticeships. These are all things that are going to tangibly improve frontline services. And I apologise to people that can't see the board. Obviously, the depot, the Customer Service Centre across the road, and the public conveniences have all got their costs of ongoing maintenance running costs. There will be a saving in costs when we shut the other depot eventually, although as we increase the number of rounds and the number of houses in the district, the cost of collecting all the waste inevitably rises. The others are offices. I did have a question from one councillor. May I mention your name? Councillor Sawyer, about the offices, and is the work that these offices that are proposed to do necessary? Absolutely. We want to tackle the issues which affect our societies most, which include domestic violence, homelessness. The welfare offices are a kind of continuation of the cost of living team that we've had for some time. The licensing support officer should enable our licensing officers to get out and about instead of doing the paperwork and shuffling licence applications and so on. They should be able to go out and about on the street, chasing down these ice cream vans and burger vans and such like that we talked about at the previous meeting so much. So that's good news. The second page is less enjoyable because these are the unavoidable costs that we have incurred. Oh, sorry. Thank you. First of all, drainage rates. We know from unfortunate events in Grantham and Tallington and Gretford and Billingborough and other places, no doubt, that the risk of flooding is on the increase, and we need our internal drainage boards to do something about that, as well as the Environment Agency and the Lead Flood Authority at the County Council and so on. However, even if we didn't think there was a problem, these rates are set by the IDBs, and other than turning up to the IDB meetings, we have little control over them. Thank goodness we're not South Holland or Boston, where the increase in the drainage rate exceeds the available council tax increase. So, external audit, local plan, apprenticeship levy are all costs that we cannot escape. That's true, isn't it, Richard? Thank you. So the total cost of all that expenditure, the previous slide and this one, £641,000. One-off budgeting proposals for this year total 2.3 million. These have been discussed at the various committees, and you've got them all in your pack. Move the slide on. Thank you. We see more flood defence. We see homeless emergency accommodation. We've had within Grantham, we've had a emergency space for what you might call a night shelter over recent weeks and months in Grantham, which has helped people back into housing. But we know that homeless emergencies are a thing, so we need to take that into account. These have been discussed at other committees. The two at the bottom are in blue because they are funded from the Future High Street Fund and don't come out of our kind of ordinary budget. It's money that's coming in to go out. Here are the capital proposals. As you would expect, we need to replace our vehicles. Oh, sorry. Thank you. We need to replace our vehicles, wheelie bins. The extension of the cattle market car park in Stamford is good news for people who want to park in Stamford long term, which should make it easier for the other car parks to keep that churn so that people can go in, do their shopping and boost our economy. In Grantham, we have an obligation to refurbish the Wharf Road car park. We don't have an obligation, but we intend to keep our play parks in good order and to improve them where possible. And finally, the Leisure SK Equipment Loan, which I thought might become controversial because Councillor Bailey had let me know that it might become controversial. So I want to tell Council about the conversation that I've had with Councillor Bailey over the last few days. There is an issue of scrutiny with the loan. The proposal is to make a loan to Leisure SK for new equipment at the Grantham Mears Leisure Centre. The order of cost is something like £250,000, and the equipment will last something like 8 years. Leisure SK came to us for a loan. This was discussed at Cabinet, and I certainly think it's a good idea. Some members of the Culture Scrutiny Committee, including the Chair, have asked if there can be a way for them to review this potential loan and what it's for and the terms and so on. And so rather than take it out of the budget and kind of scupper the budget process, I'm saying let's put it into the budget process and have a overview scrutiny committee meeting between now and the next financial year, so over the next couple of weeks, to have a one-item culture leisure agenda to talk about the loan and the way Leisure SK wish to use it. I hope that's an acceptable solution for Councillor Bailey and Councillor Turner and Councillor Dobson, and I hope that that we'll all be pleased with the outcome. Certainly, I wouldn't want to risk jeopardising the business plan of Leisure SK, which obviously is a lively document that changes as situation changes. I wouldn't want to deprive Grantham residents of an excellent public sector accessible gym. I wouldn't want to delay any of that. If there's a good business case for investing in the equipment, then we want to crack on to keep our leisure centres open, because we've learned enough about leisure centres that are poorly maintained and don't have the right equipment and don't have the right footfall. So that's that one. There's another picture. I think that picture is restricted. I hope I'm not going to get into any trouble. The consultation on, so I'm getting close to the end, consultation on the budget was very good this year in terms of support for the council tax increase. You can see last year it was a kind of Brexity type split of 48-46 with some don't knows around council tax increases. This year it's I wouldn't say emphatic, but there is a clear majority of people who took part in the consultation, 792, in favour of putting up the council tax by the highest amount. I am perfectly aware that there are a lot more than 792 people who live in the district. We have consulted as far as we are able. We cannot force people to take part in the consultation, but those that did have said, yes, please, more council tax, or words to that effect. So, as it kind of draw to the end, we have done some great things over the last year. This isn't a state of the district statement, but I am delighted with the Fix My Street announcement that Reece has said earlier in the meeting. So it's the same system. So as we move towards local government reorganisation, where we will be in the same or in unitary authorities, at the moment, up until very recently, you could only report on Fix My Street, potholes, Lincolnshire County Council street lights and other Lincolnshire County Council things. You can now report on there both Lincolnshire County Council things and South Kesteven District Council things like dead animals and fly tipping. And, if you've got the app, Bristol City Council things and Rutland, I think, and anywhere else. So if you've got the app on your phone, as you all, I'm sure, have, you can report anything you see anywhere. So please, if you go into Bristol, whack the app and report as many as you like over there. Dead animals, the whole lot. And also in South Kesteven as well. This is also the time to mention the rounds. So there will be a round review of the bin rounds. What do we bin collections? In order to gain economies and efficiencies and so on, sooner or later, I mean it's probably sooner, we will have to change the day that some people have their bins emptied. In other authorities, this happens more frequently. I'm not talking about bank holidays when it all gets put back by one day. I'm saying that my bin, since I moved into the Deepings in November 2006, my bin has always been emptied on a Thursday. It is a risk that it may now be emptied on a different day of the week, and me and my neighbours will need to get used to it. We want to communicate that to people because I know how emotional people can be about bins. And if the person on your street that is in charge of putting the bin out first, and you all follow with your purple or grey or whatever colour bin, if he gets it wrong or she gets it wrong, then we're in trouble. So here's early warning, we are changing the bin rounds, but we will still empty your bin. Talking about Fix My Street also, we are looking at, it's not a decision yet, but we are looking at changing, we're changing our cab reporting schemes for the bin wagons so that when bins are not presented on time, or if there is an issue, such as a closed road or a flooded street or so on, the people who are in the cab, the waste team, can immediately report that back to HQ via in-cab satellite phone, whatever they use, and that also we hope to integrate into Fix My Street. So if someone goes on to Fix My Street to say my bin's not been emptied or whatever, then they will instantly get a reply that says that's because your neighbour's parked like an idiot, or whatever is put into the cab. So that's great news during this year, great news coming, great budget, and here's a picture of the Customer Service Centre that has been mentioned already. It's in Grantham, obviously, because we get the most footfall for customer services in Grantham, and it's also a picture that I particularly like because it shows that although we can do little as individual councillors, as I learned over 8 years with some colleagues, together we can do so much, and so I would really appreciate cross-party support for this budget, and I look forward to Bridget seconding and your intelligent questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lay, are you seconding the proposal, and do you wish to speak now?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm happy to second this budget. There's been so many discussions on the budget. There's been so many people involved in this, and I hope that all members feel that they've been able to attend some of the finance meetings and the budget meetings to be able to discuss this. So I'd like to pass on a thanks to all the officers and all members that have been involved in this, and I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll now move into debate. I have 3 councillors waiting to speak. First one is Councillor Bishnow Singh. Did you press your button incorrectly, sir?
I don't think so. I think my paper. I apologise, Mr. Chairman.
No, not a problem, Councillor. Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to propose an amendment in reference to recommendation 5 regarding Muslim interment fees, which will be appearing on the screen shortly. As Council may recall, I submitted an amendment at the last meeting and I accepted that it should go to Cabinet. And on receiving the report to Cabinet, I realised my one omission in my proposal was the Children's Funeral Fund for England, created in 2019, which reimburses the Council for burial of under-18s, thereby imposing no cost on bereaved families of children, negating one key element of my amendment. It's therefore all about one word, and that's discrimination. The question of whether or not differential fees are discriminatory comes down to the difference regarding reflecting fair and reasonable differences in cost. The standard argument is that the need for what is called a shrouded rather than a coffin burial, and the need for a 24-hour burial, which may necessitate a weekend shift for grave diggers, something you can clearly see on page 147 of your pack we don't offer anyway, increases the cost of a Muslim burial to such an extent that it is reasonable for a council to charge more. The Muslim Burial Fund estimates that a Muslim burial could reasonably be charged £300 to £400 more, but they also acknowledge that a Jewish burial, which has extremely similar demands to a Muslim burial, would also cost an equivalent amount more. So there does appear to be some logic behind there being a difference, but by not including a separate fee schedule for Jewish burials, it has singled Muslims out. But here's the flaw. By not levying an exclusive right of burial fee on Muslim burials, they are not £300 to £400 more expensive as intended, they are £300 to £400 less expensive by accident. There is therefore no fair and reasonable explanation for the difference in cost, which means the fees as they stand are, to me at least, very clearly and undoubtedly discriminatory. Having worked with people of different religions, particularly Muslims, and having worked with the group that used to advise councils on equalities, I know that most religious groups don't want to be singled out for any form of special treatment, be it positive or negative. I also know from my work on a government anti-extremism programme in the mid to late 2000s, when the BNP was having a surge in support, that it has other consequences. If people feel that others are getting something at a different rate based purely on religion, particularly on an issue as sensitive as burial fees, it plays directly into the hands of extremists who seek to cause division in our society. I contacted the Grantham Islamic Centre and asked them for their opinion, and this is what they said. I do agree with your sentiments, and I feel you are correct in trying to bring things in line with other burials. We appreciate the need for a quick burial, but like you say, that is no different from the Jewish traditions, and as such it certainly appears discriminatory for the council to single out Muslim burials like this. Grantham is quickly becoming an increasingly diverse community, and the last thing we would want is for anyone potentially looking to move into Grantham to be put off by what would appear to be discriminatory rules, regardless of whichever aspect of life or death it involves. I haven't heard a single argument as to why this isn't discrimination. Accidental rather than deliberate, yes. A cock-up rather than a conspiracy, but discrimination nevertheless. I've had messages from members of every party and group represented here in this council chamber, except for one, all supporting the principle of scrapping these discriminatory differential fees. I therefore appeal to the leader to accept my amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a seconder for that amendment? Thank you, Councillor Manterfield. And I understand Councillor Stokes is going to reply to your amendment. Councillor Stokes.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to bring a little bit of clarity in. From this side, we do accept Councillor Knight's words and observations. These burials were introduced 6 years ago, actually, and 5 years ago onto the fees and charges. It was actually brought in at the request of the Muslim community, who had actually felt excluded from burials within Grantham Crematorium. So they felt they were being excluded. And I think that in the very best of faith, arrangements were made to incorporate those fees within our fees and charges. And you're quite right, by one way or another, the thing looks all lopsided now. And so it was all done in good faith. No way was any discriminatory things thought of. It was actually brought in 5 years ago, so we've had various administrations, if you like, miss the point on this one. So we're going to look at this, and I think the leader is going to make a recommendation based on this, what you've proposed.
Do you wish to speak, Leader?
Thank you. I take some of your points, Councillor Knight, and thank you for the clarification, Councillor Stokes. I understand that we have only had 5 over 4 years, or 4 over 5 years? 4 burials over 5 years. Given the sentiments that you've expressed and the comments that you've had from across the chamber, I'm happy to accept this motion because, for the reasons explained. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That then becomes part of the substantive motion, so we need not vote or continue conversation on that. I now have Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, I think there's lots of good things in this budget, so I'm not totally against it anyway. There's some things I'm a little bit disappointed with, and they mainly relate to, I suppose, the funding that we've got, which is outside of our control. So, to start with, obviously the 3% rise in council tax, I'm okay with that, and the 2.7% rise on rents, that's okay. I'm disappointed, and I think everybody will be, that the government stopped the Rural Services Grant, and we've lost £400,000. That's outside of our control, so be it, we've had to accommodate it. I would also like to thank Richard Wiles, who every year prepares this budget with his team, and I know he works with the administration. Other comments I've got to make. property maintenance. As everybody will know, my background is in property, so I was keen to note that we're starting a condition survey on our property maintenance, and they've allowed £1 million in that. I think that's good news. HRA capital programme, I know we've put quite a lot of money in that, and I just hope that that follows the stock condition survey that we're doing. And in actual fact, that money that we put in does relate to the evidence we've got from the condition survey. I'm in favour of all those things. If I then come on to flooding, and I know flooding's been very topical, we've had lots of people flooded, and it causes very much distress in the area. Not just in my ward in particular at Westborough, and I know in other people's wards. And just recently at the Environmental Committee we had a lady almost sobbing came to the committee. Councillor Selby will notice that. She spoke in great detail and sadness about how she's been flooded. And the Environment Committee were very receptive to that. And I think it is devastating. If a property gets flooded, it's devastating. The people are outside the houses for so long. And I know Councillor Dilch will know this. If people get flooded and they're in 3 foot of water, it's devastating, isn't it, Phil? It's devastating, Phil. So I think we've got to recognise that. I know that Links County Council are the lead flood authority, and they do so much, but we've got other agencies involved, Environment Agency, and SKDC do have a role to play, and Phil Swinton actually leads that role. At the moment, we have a small budget for flooding. It's included in the General Fund Reserve Statement. And what I propose is an amendment. I think we should recognise that flooding is going to increase and we must do our bit to it. So I would like to propose an amendment that we take £100,000 out of the Local Priorities Reserve and add it to the existing Flood Reserve Fund. I think that's a sensible thing. It isn't, as I see it, a major amendment. It's a minor amendment, that's the way I see it. It retains the budget as financially sound, and I know you'd probably say it's not my place to say that, that's Richard's place to say it, but it seems to me moving from one budget to another isn't a major thing, and I hope we all can support that. Flooding is a devastating thing. I've known people who've been flooded in my area, say, and other wards. It's not just affecting my wards, and I'm not pointing the finger at everybody, but we all have to do our bit. So that's what I propose, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the proposed amendment. We are attempting to get it on the screen. In fact, yep, it's on the screen, so could you look at it? Do we have a seconder for your amendment, Councillor? Councillor Crawford, thank you. Could I get a response from you, Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, thank you. I know very well from my county ward that flooding does affect people. I've had people in Gretford that have literally just moved back into their homes after the flood of 2004, just moved in and then suffered another flood. It's dreadful. We are not the lead flood authority. We support the people through largely the work of Phil Swinton and his colleagues, who have done an absolutely outstanding job. So I wish, Councillor Wood, that you had thought of this idea before today and maybe shared it with the 151 officer or with myself or at any of the umpteen meetings that we've had about the budget, including some since the most recent floods in Grantham, because you're in danger of looking like you're jumping on a bandwagon or what have you. I'm not going to say no, because it is moving money from one reserve to another. And obviously, if we had a shocking impact of a flood, it would be within our power as a council to shift money from local priorities to flood reserve. I mean, what is more of a local priority than getting people out of flooded houses? I don't know. But given that I would assume that you're putting it forward in good faith, I'd be happy to go straight to a button vote, Councillor Fellows, and allow the whole council to make their mind up.
Are you accepting the amendment You're not accepting the amendment. You wanted to go to a vote. Because it's in the 111, we would have to debate and then we'd need to go to a, what's it vote? A recorded vote. So if you're not accepting the amendment as it stands, we have to go into debate on the amendment and then we have to have a recorded vote on the amendment.
Thank you. In order to prevent a long-winded and frankly tedious recorded vote on this particular amendment that's been brought up at the last possible minute, may I ask, Chair, that you just conduct a kind of show of hands in the chamber as a kind of straw poll before we get into the details of it. If it is clear that everybody thinks it's a great idea, then I will accept the amendment.
Point of order, Councillor Shorrock.
I've had my light on for
Yeah,
ages.
you're actually second on my list, and now you've come off.
I've
You've
had
gone
on
off.
for ages, and I've got 2 points of order. One was the original amendment which came over from here, which was not really clear, and it was not clear that they actually accepted it in the first place around the fees for Muslim burials. That was not clear, and we're getting into a situation again over this amendment, whether are they going to accept it or they're not going to accept it. Chair, can you make sure that we're really, really clear about what they are accepting and what they're not accepting? I have a huge problem with that amendment, mainly because they haven't actually said what they want to do specifically in relation to the budget, and that's the thing that has to be recorded, right? And they haven't done that at all. So 2 points of order, and I got delayed on this because you didn't let me in. That one and that one. Can you rule to say specifically what should happen in relation to those 2 amendments and whether they've accepted them or not?
Thank you for the lecture, Councillor. The reason why I did not acknowledge you is your name come up on my screen as someone wishing to speak. It was not indicated there was a point of order or information. If you'd actually said point of order, Chair, I would have recognised you. So apologies for getting over that one. I was absolutely clear on what's happening on Councillor Knight's amendment, and I was also clear on the fact that it was being accepted by the leader. On the second one, I will go with what you're saying, that there is no clarity yet, because the leader himself has said there's no clarity. But just to move us on, and for a sense of moving us on, I will actually just take a very quick straw poll. If you are in favour, broadly, of accepting Councillors... Councillor Dilks.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Wood, for what you've raised. It does sound remarkably like, as you have alluded to, the amendment that I put in at the county last week to the budget, and you're nodding. But what I did then was I published that amendment before the meeting so that the ruling group could consider it, and I'm pleased to say they accepted it. And so we got £1 million moved into, a specific flood reserve, and created that reserve from the existing reserves. So a similar sort of thing. But I understood that amendments to this current budget were required, significant amendments were required to be published, was it 10 or some days ago, 5 days ago. Am I right? And is this a significant amendment? Thank you.
I'm going to go to Graham Watt so we can have a... No? Sorry, Richard.
Just in terms of both of them, the Muslim one, I'm satisfied that does not compromise the budget framework proposals that are here this afternoon because of the low usage of that particular fee. So even if that alignment is agreed this afternoon, I'm not concerned it fragments the budget proposals. In respect to the movement of the reserve proposal, equally I'm satisfied that that movement between 2 discretionary revenue reserves does not impact or change the budget framework proposal. So if that is supported this afternoon, I'm satisfied that does not compromise the budget overall. The only point I'd make about that, members will know there's a 30,000 reserve already in existence for the flood reserve response. The latest costings that Phil has presented for me is 21,000 of that will be used in response to the recent events. So my recommendation to the Governance and Audit Committee in July when we take the outturn would be to replenish that reserve as part of the outturn work that we do at year end, which is to replenish reserves that have been used during the year. So my journey would take us to looking at that reserve anyway at that point in time, which will be later in this year. But clearly there's a proposal today to put that reserve at a higher level than it is at the moment, and I don't believe it compromises the budget, so I'm happy for that amendment to go forward if so wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Is it a point of order, Councillor Morgan, or a point of information?
It's requesting clarification, please, because are we going to debate on the amendment, or are we going to go straight into a vote? Because I've got quite an important point to make, and that is this 100,000, totally, I was at the meeting where the residents spoke, is that 100,000 for our works, as in providing sandbags, moving vehicles around, providing staff, or is that 100,000 or part of it to go to the actual householders who we've now been advised would not get support from insurance should they be flooded again? I think there's quite an important difference to understand, because obviously that would lead our officers, when they get the funding or need to access the reserve.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for the clarification. What you realise is more complex than would seem, but in order to move us on and taking on board what has already been said by councillors, if the leader is prepared to accept that amendment, that will become part of the substantive motion. If the leader still requires an indication from the councillors, I'm prepared to admit it. Leader, do you still want a straw poll, or do you accept the amendment?
I'd prefer a straw poll.
Could you please raise your hands if in principle you feel that this amendment is a reasonable one to do and the way it has been done? If you're in favour of it, please raise your hands. If you're against it, please raise your hands. Leader, do you accept the amendment, or do we go to debate?
I think we should go to debate. And I'd just like to say that this is what happens when people come up with policies on the spur of the moment.
No, unless you've already spoken, so as long as it is a point of information, Councillor.
Chairman, yeah, first of all, I'd just like to apologise for not coming to you, but yes, I did see the video of the County Council. I didn't see it till earlier this week, and that's what prompted me to do it, which didn't give me the 5 days' time to put the notice in. So I apologise for bringing it to you at the last minute.
Thank you, Councillor, for the apology. We are where we are. We're in debate, and I will remind you, at the end of the debate, we will have to have a recorded vote on this amendment. On my screen now, I've got Councillor Whittington.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just make clear, I'm speaking in favour of this amendment, and obviously reserve my right to speak in the debate subsequently. This was, as Councillor Dilks says, a motion that the opposition groups at County brought forward at the County Council meeting last week. And again, that was, it was a fair, I mean, I accept it was done within because there's a 24-hour unofficial rule of county, and it was brought in at that time. But it was done in response to the report of the Floods Committee of the Monday of that week, which indicated that more money was needed for flooding across the county. We have seen recently in Grantham quite extensive flooding in the centre of Grantham. Somebody's lived in Grantham for over 60 years. I've never seen flooding to that extent before in the centre of Grantham. I've got residents in my county patch out of Sedgebrook and Allington. Some people have been flooded 4 times in 3 years. Part of the money that was allocated, because again at the County Council last week, the motion put forward by the opposition was just for a flat £1 million. And it was the ruling group then that sort of came up with the idea that it should be used then as a household fund to be given to householders to help them recover from the fact they had been flooded out. And several very important points. One's also been referred to by Councillor Morgan, a lot of insurance companies now aren't paying residents out if they have been flooded more than once or in a really bad flood area. We know a scheme that the government had in place, they've now rowed back on some of that. So residents really now are struggling. I mean, potentially £100,000, roughly £5,000 so residents who've been affected can get a flood door. In effect, would mean that we could probably help 20 households, roughly, in SK. And we have had some quite serious flooding. So potentially we could use this money to help households recover as the county scheme. And the reason why the county had to bring that scheme in, as I say, was because a lot of insurance companies aren't paying out, the government are rowing back on their scheme. I just think that this is such a fundamental issue that's going to affect an awful lot of our residents, and increasingly affect our residents. That I know we're not the lead flood authority, and I fully accept that, but I believe we owe a duty to our residents who are flooded out to help and support them. So therefore, I'm in favour of this amendment and will be supporting it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I was just hoping that somebody would clarify for me, perhaps the proposer of the motion, was this money intended to pay for the services which South Kesteven District Council supplies to people affected by flooding? Was it as a discretionary fund for people who are actually affected by the flooding that they could apply to? Or was the intention, as I'm getting almost from Councillor Whittington, that anyone, whether they be our tenants or whether they not be our tenants, they could benefit from this fund? I'm finding it difficult to understand the exact purpose and how you would like to allocate the money. If somebody could clarify, that would be lovely. Thank you.
I wish to move the debate on. I won't allow you to speak directly to the Councillor on this, but I'm going to bring in Richard Wiles.
Just really to clarify, I don't think the proposal of the amendment is to seek to change the criteria on which that reserve has been used. It's been used now in 2 events, so it is the Council's response, has been stated outside of our actual statutory responsibilities, but it's our community response to the flooding event. So it's costs we are incurring, and it's how we're funding those costs. There is no proposal, I don't understand that to be the case, to pass any costs on to any financial support to the householders. It's just about the costs we are incurring in response. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping and praying that this fund doesn't actually ever need to be used. I'm certain that if we do vote to allocate this additional money to that fund, it would be subject to outturn the following year, and hopefully we won't see any more flooding. This could help 20 homes, but not as the text is written. And I accept that it's been provided in good faith, absolutely. But because that hasn't been brought to us earlier, and immediately following on from what Mr. Wiles has said, it seems that that 100,000 would simply allow the council to reimburse itself for community work, the cost of fuel, the cost of overtime, etc. And so, as written, that could not go to any homes. So, I'm still very ambivalent on whether or not this increase in funding would achieve what Councillor Wood wants it to. And I think all of us would be behind helping our homeowners and our businesses and the homes in our district.
Is it a point of information, Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, listening to Councillor Whittington and getting the clarification, hearing also Councillor Baker's point, getting the clarification from Mr. Wiles, I think I give in. I can't face kind of the prospect. We're talking about moving money about from one reserve to another, and this is money that is kind of within the council's gift anyway. We're really it's shuffling papers really. So in order to save us the tedium of a recorded vote, I'm going to accept the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for the clarity. I'm now Councillor Shorrock. Thank you, Councillor Shorrock. I'm hoping names are going to disappear off this because people put their names forward to speak on this amendment. Are there any other amendments on the substantive motion that now contains 2 agreed amendments? We are now going to go to the vote from sections 1 to 11. It needs to be a recorded vote, so I'm going to pass on to Graham, who is going to ask you. Councillor Dilks.
I had indicated to speak on the budget, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if others had.
Thank you.
Oh, you'd like me to?
Seems like a reasonable thing to do, Councillor. The only other way, Councillor, is for you to speak after we've had this vote on the first 11, which makes sense.
Well, no, I want to speak on the budget itself.
Go for it.
And because we had the amendments thrown in, it kind of threw that list, I think. But thank you. Thank you. May I say thank you to the leader for once again presenting an excellent budget for the coming year. I've written this down, but it's the second budget prepared under the current administration, and the budget broadly accepted by our residents and without significant proposed amendments from across the chamber until the last one. I'm sure we all join with you, Leader, in thanking Richard Wiles and all our officers who've worked hard with you and with Cabinet to reach these final proposals, but also thank you to all elected members. We should be thanking all elected members from both the administration and the opposition who've played their role in this process. I particularly wish to pay tribute to the chairman of our Finance and Economic Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Bridget Lay, for the professional, efficient, open and accountable way in which she dealt with the wide-ranging issues from all sides raised at the recent Budget Joint Scrutiny Committee. I believe the whole Council can agree with me that Councillor Lay has once again demonstrated she is the best possible member of this Council by far to be doing that job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baxter, do you want to add further to that to sum up before we go to the vote on this? Oh, I do apologise to 2 other councillors who wish to speak. Councillor Whittington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Exercising my right to speak under the, because I've already spoken in favour of the amendment, and now exercising my right to speak under the revised amendment, under the revised budget. And whilst I largely welcome this budget, it's difficult times that we're facing. There are an awful lot of risks facing this council. You only got to look at Appendix D, the risk register there, to see that there's some very, very high levels of financial risk coming down here. And I think the leader, did refer to that, saying that whilst we can probably okay for the next couple of years, potentially we are running into a difficult situation with cost pressures and a difficult political situation. We're talking about local government reform later on, but that's going to be a big challenge for us. We know that the government are going to do a revised financial settlement for local governments, which is due out in the spring, summer of this year. I have some real concerns about that because we've already seen in the ending of the Rural Services Delivery Grant that the new government doesn't seem to be any great friends of rural areas. It used to be accepted when local government funding was being allocated that there were various indices that were considered as part of the allocation process, and deprivation was one of them. But rurality and sparsity was also viewed to be quite important. It's now apparent that rurality and sparsity as an indice, as a way of calculating funding is no longer on the table, and deprivation has become the sole driver of this, which I think is a real shame because, we have to get the message across to government that deprivation just doesn't exist in inner city areas. I'm not saying inner city areas don't have their problems, they undoubtedly do. But in rural areas, we have some real areas of deprivation. Part of the area represented on the county council and the area represented on this district council by Councillor Steptoe and Cunnington on the Earlsfield estate is one of the most deprived wards, not only in South Kesteven, Lincolnshire, but also nationwide. I really do think we need to get a message across the government. I think that's incumbent upon all of us to actually say that deprivation isn't just confined to urban areas. It exists in our rural communities, out in our rural villages as well. A lot of it is hidden. And we all need to fight for proper, fairer funding for local authorities, especially rural ones. It undoubtedly costs. I was the previous portfolio holder for the environment, and I know Councillor Baker, it costs us a lot of money to do a bin service across a large rural area. And that isn't, it's those kind of extra additional costs. And if we're losing money, they're no longer taking rurality and sparsity seriously. Potentially, this council is going to lose a lot of money that it's previously had. So I really do think it's incumbent upon all of us across the political divide here to encourage the leader and the cabinet to really go and bang that message. I'm on the executive committee of the National Executive Committee of the Rural Services Network, and we've been banging this message on fair funding. And yes, the previous Conservative government were less than helpful, but this new Labour government have been even less helpful than the previous one were in terms of addressing issues faced by rural areas. So please, let us all bang the message. Let's get some proper funding that actually acknowledges the real costs of providing services in rural areas, and especially deprived rural areas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a brief from me. As the leader mentioned earlier, obviously I did have an amendment today. I even had written my speech around the 240,000 allocation for leisure SK equipment investments. But I am thankful, following conversations over the last few days with the leader and the chairman of the Culture and Leisure OSC, we have agreed my recommendation that this item will now come to an extraordinary meeting of Culture and Leisure before PERDA starts. I look forward to that debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thank you. This does partly tie into what Councillor Whittington was saying. I think this, I really welcome this budget, in particular being a Grantham councillor, and St John's area is actually one of the lowest income areas as well in the county. We have a lot of residents who are paying private rental charges and living in some cases, quite appalling conditions, with very low incomes. They are hugely dependent upon the support of the council. So the fact that we've got the continuation of the welfare officers and the cost of living team is hugely welcome. So thank you so much for that and the work that they're doing. And I also want to particularly welcome our new temporary housing. That's an ongoing job almost daily. The officers there will be managing that site. It's so important. We haven't had that before in the town the size of Grantham, so this is hugely important that we are taking literally people off the street and giving them a roof over their head, and I think it must be one of the most important things we're actually doing. So thank you so much to everybody who's been involved in the delivery of that on an ongoing basis. I would just like to pick up, and I totally support the point about the budget for rural authorities and what's happening across the country there. But you can't escape the fact that the county council, for example, had budget cuts of 70% under the Conservative administration. 70%. And it's quite staggering, and we're now expecting within less than a year the new Labour government, whatever our feelings are, to somehow make up for that. I think, however, we should be beating the drum for our rural areas, but I just felt that had to be said. Moving forward, I know we talked earlier, we've got an amendment before us, which I totally support. What I would like to see is that our rural and communities OSC actually look at the issue of the flooding and potential funding we could potentially offer our householders if we're saying the 100,000 is actually going into the existing kitty for our current provision. if I could just put that suggestion forward for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baxter, would you care to sum up, please?
Thank you. It's a great budget. Everybody says so. I think for brevity is important in these meetings, and therefore I'll sit down.
Thank you, Councillor. We're now going to vote on recommendations 1 to 11. That has to be a recorded vote, so I'll hand over to Graham Watts to deal with that.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Council's asked to vote on the substantive motion. If I will call your name out in alphabetical order. If you could tell me whether you wish to vote for, against or abstain in relation to the motion. So, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Emma Baker. Councillor Rhys Baker. Councillor Baxter. Councillor Bellamy. Councillor Bisnell Singh. Councillor Bosworth. Councillor Bird. Councillor Crawford. Councillor Cunnington. Councillor Dilks. Councillor Dixon Warren. Councillor Dobson. Councillor Ellis. Councillor Fellows. Councillor Gadd. Councillor Harrison. Councillor Gill. Councillor Johnson. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Knight. Councillor Knowles. Councillor Lane. Councillor Leadenham. Councillor Lay. Councillor Mansfield. Councillor Milnes. Councillor Moran. Councillor Morgan. Councillor Noon. Councillor Rahman. Councillor Rayside. Councillor Sawyer. Councillor Selby. Councillor Shorrock. Councillor Smith. Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Paul Stokes. Councillor Ian Stokes. Councillor Stooke. Councillor Trollope-Bellew. Councillor Trotter. Councillor Turner. Councillor Whittington. Councillor Jane Wood. Councillor Paul Wood. I do apologise.
Apologies, Councillor.
Councillor Kingman. I do apologise, Councillor Kingman.
Councillor Sturrock, is a point of order? Go for it, Councillor.
I know we're just taking the vote on it, but I'm trying to make sure that we're clear that we've amended the section about fees for Muslim burials as it's set out in the motion. As it stands, I'm trying to work out what we voted for because it wasn't clear in the amendment.
Graham, can you?
Thank you, Chairman. My understanding is that the amendment from Councillor Knight was accepted by the proposer of the motion. It became a substantive motion. The substantive motion was then amended by Councillor Councillor Wood. Thank you. That also was accepted, so it became a substantive motion. So both amendments have been incorporated in the substantive motion. That was my feeling was that was made clear to members. That was a substantive motion that members were debating, and that's a substantive motion that members have just voted upon.
Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Sturrock? I think the information was correct.
So we're really clear, because this has been raised with me as well. What we've just passed is that the fees for Muslim burials will be exactly the same as other burials. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, Councillor. Thank you. Have we got a result, Graham? Do you want to let the councillors know?
Thank you, Chairman. So to confirm, there were 32 votes in favour and 15 abstentions, so the motion has passed, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. So officially the motion is carried. We now need to proceed to voting for the rest of the recommendations, unless there is anyone that feels like they want to speak on these. I'm hoping that we are all satisfied. In that case, I'm going to ask you to vote for the rest of the recommendations on your buttons, and can you please press now? Yes, we're doing the rest of the recommendations. Is that okay, Councillor? It's all right, and I think we're cut down on the time, so you've got to be quick. Can we restart it, or have we done it? Can we vote now, if you've not voted? I think, right, I'm going to make a ruling that we really need to do that again. So, yeah, you press for, you're accepting the proposals, or against, or abstaining. You should know which button to press, hopefully. If you don't, can you ask your next door neighbour or look over someone's shoulder? And, good to go? Can I ask you to vote now, please? Done? Yep. Right, the votes are on the screen. I will read them out if anyone is watching on video and can't see it. 432, abstain 16, and then now they've gone off, so that's great. I'd also like to be absolutely upfront with my councillor colleagues. I've pressed the wrong button 4 times. Thank you for your forbearance and your patience, councillors. We're going to do the next agenda item before having a break.
Chairman, can we just check the figures on that, because it didn't seem to add up, because we got 49 votes and we only have 47 members in the room. So I don't know if somebody's pressed some spare seat buttons.
Point of order, Councillor Turner.
I believe that...
Order, please, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Turner.
I believe the disparity may be answered by Graham, because after the last voting electronically, he said that if the member didn't vote, it was counted as an abstention. But Councillor Woolley isn't here, for example. She would have been included in the system, so that would have counted as an abstention, which is why there's a disparity in the numbers.
We are going to go to a vote by hands on this one, ladies and gentlemen. And we may try the Illinois system a little bit further down the line when it's easier. If you are for the motion, can you please raise your hands now? Sorry, members, some people are putting 2 hands up. Can we do this properly, and then perhaps we can get to a break at some point? Keep your hands in the air while Karen checks the numbers. Any against? One at the back. Thank you, Councillor. And abstentions, please. Thank you, councillors. We have that. The motion is passed. Not that you hadn't worked that out. Will you please stop having fun? We have one. We're now going to pass on to agenda item 7, which is the appointment of the local returning officer. To consider appointing a local returning officer to be responsible for administering the Greater Lincolnshire Combined County Authority mayoral elections in South Kesteven. The proposer for this is Councillor Baxter. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I'd be quite interested later to see the numbers for that last vote. The appointment of a local returning officer, the information's in the report, which I'm sure you have read. We have great confidence in our Chief Executive, Karen Bradford, and I recommend that we approve her appointment. There's absolutely no need for people to add value to the debate unless they're going to speak against the proposal. So in the interest of brevity, I'd look for a seconder, formally or otherwise, and hope that you'll all support this recommendation.
Yeah, so Helen Crawford seconded that. Thank you. Graham.
Chairman, I just wanted to, if there were any, if members did want to debate against appointing Karen Bradford as the local returning officer, then I would ask that the Chief Executive relieves the chamber during that discussion. I don't know how members, what members wish to say, so I just want to have that clarity.
I am totally assuming the answer to that is not, so if you're in favour of that recommendation, could you raise your hands, please, ladies and gentlemen? I don't know who we're going to get to count. Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Unanimously carried. Welcome and thank you for doing that job, Chief Exec. I know that Graham didn't want it. How are we doing for time? We've got, yeah, can we do the next agenda item first, please? Because that, again, should not be too difficult. Agenda item 8, political proportionality and allocation of seats on committees. I haven't got a proposer for this. We're invited to note the change to the authority's political proportionality and consider appointments to seats on committees. So it's monitoring officer. That's you, Graham. Thank you, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just an update to Council following a change in political proportionality and the allocation of seats on committees. Group leaders have been consulted with and their nominations are set out in the report, so Council is invited to approve those appointments to committees, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Knowles.
Yes, I propose that we adopt this as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Bishnow Singh. We're going to go straight to the vote. All in favour, please raise your hands. And against? Any abstentions? Did we get the abstentions? We are going to adjourn for 10 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. So if we can start at 22, that would be really convenient. Thanks a lot. To speak on agenda item 9 to consider approving amendments to the Constitution recommended by the Governance and Ordinance Committee on the 13th of February. Councillor Knowles.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce item 9 on your agenda and would request your support. Matter involves the election. There are 2 amendments that are being proposed, and I'd, with your permission, like to take them separately as we go through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, both amendments, where the Council is asked to approve 2 amendments to the Constitution, which both aim to improve openness and transparency and the quality of decision-making with meetings at the Council. The first one involves item 7.3 of the Council's Constitution, and it talks about removal of the leader. And it proposes that eventually a notice of motion must be submitted and full Council passes that in order to remove the leader. At the moment, the 3.2 says that the leader will be a councillor elected to the position of leader by full council and will hold the office for a 4-year term, unless 1, they resign from office, 2, they are no longer a councillor, or 3, a full council passes a resolution to remove the leader from office. The amendment will make it clear that a notice of motion has to be submitted and a full council pass that resolution to remove the leader from office. Clearly, any proposal to remove the leader of office has to be something of a significant and serious nature. And it should not be, certainly in my mind, be undertaken lightly or without such notice that gives members the opportunity to discuss and consult and to consider their motion very, very seriously. I believe it desirable that all matters that are serious should have, anything that has great consequence should have notice and should have the opportunity for members to consult and to consider. I do recognise that amendments do come forward on the day of some matters that are improved and can be changed appropriately in that way. But normally this should be a matter of serious consequence and should not be a matter that comes up through an amendment, however spurious it might be or could be in order to find this particular resolution. So I propose that we accept this part of item 9. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder for that? Oh, thank you, Councillor Stuck. I couldn't read it, mate. Anyone want to speak on this? Right, we actually are going to try the electronic buttons again, people. So if you're in favour of this point, could you please press your buttons now? Hopefully it adds up. 433, abstaining 11, against 3, total of 47. Does it add up? Apparently not.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it adds up to 47 that were in the room, but we're now not 47 in the room because there's one member that's not returned since the break. So, and that member's vote automatically goes into abstention. So we haven't had time to update the system. So it's 33, 11 and 3, but that councillor's vote has gone into the 11 abstentions. So it's 33, 10 and 3.
Thank you, Karen. And from now on, for the rest of the day, we'll be doing voting in the traditional way. That's worth a try. Could I ask you please to raise your hands if you're in favour of this part of the agenda item? All in favour?
That's right, you can take it. I just was explaining it.
Oh. Yeah?
Members, that was fine for the last vote. It's just as long as I knew that the numbers were slightly amended needed on the abstention vote. Thank you.
I really am having one of those days. Councillor Knowles, would you like to speak on the second part of the agenda item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The second item on the agenda is an even simpler proposal, and that is that the word original appears in the clause in 2 ways. At the moment it says an amendment to a motion must be relevant to the motion and will either be A, B, C or D. And at the end it says as long as the effect of B to D does not negate the motion. It is introducing the word original on 2 occasions. The first part of it will say an amendment to a motion must be relevant to the original motion and will either be A, B, C or D, and as long as the effect of B and D does not negate the original motion. Quite honestly, for myself, I can't understand that because it's unnecessary, because any amendment should be, as far as I'm concerned, relevant to the original motion. but it's been deemed appropriate just to clarify matters for clarity purposes only that we put in the word original on 2 occasions so that we all understand that what we mean by the original motion. Thank you very much indeed. I ask for your support.
And do I get a seconder for that part of the agenda item? Thank you, Councillor Baxter. After consulting with my colleagues, we are going to go electric, but we are going to make sure that the one that comes up as an abstention is not counted. So if you're in favour of that part of the agenda, could you please vote now? So that is passed again, 37, 9 and 1. One we've taken off the abstentions, so that works out. Thank you. That part of the agenda item is passed. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. We now move on to agenda item 11, which is the agenda item 10. And Graham is going to talk us through this one, hopefully.
Thank you, Chairman. Before bringing in the relevant Cabinet member in, I just wanted to apologise to Council for some confusion. The front sheet of the agenda page under the item is different to the purpose of the report that's attached at page 185 of your pack. It's the report that you should refer to in consideration of this item, so I just wanted to make that point and apologise for any inconvenience. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So we are I'm just getting my papers in order. Please talk amongst yourselves. Yes, this is the community fund. I went back again. Which one we're talking about? Yes, we're talking about the appointment of the I got it. No, yeah. We start again. What we are hoping to do is approve the proposed schedule for the appointment for the role of lead member for Armed Forces, approve the proposed role description for lead member for Armed Forces, and appoint a member to the role of lead member for Armed Forces. Who is speaking on this one, please? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the opportunity to present this report on the appointment of a lead member for Armed Forces. By way of background, one of the requirements of the Armed Forces Covenant is for the Council to have an elected member champion for the Armed Forces. The Council, therefore, has had a champion since it signed the Armed Forces Covenant in 2012. Unlike other appointments, such as representatives to outside bodies, for example, which are appointed on an annual basis, the role of Armed Forces champion has been held by an elected member until either they step down or are not re-elected. A little bit like the Pope, I guess, that it can be a job for life unless there's a resignation, and that shouldn't be the case. Historically and justifiably, this position has always been filled by a member who has a military background. The title champion was altered to lead member for Armed Forces when the role was formalised and the current incumbent, Councillor Richard Dixon-Warren, was appointed by the Council in September 2022. Proposals in the report suggest further formalisation of the role and its appointment. The report sets out a structure to the role by means of a job description, and I'm grateful to all those concerned in not only putting this report together, but also to Councillor Dixon-Warren for helping to put the job description together, role description. And you can find that at Appendix A of the report and a timetable for the appointment to the role. It is proposed that the role be appointed every 2 years or following an election or resignation as and when may be necessary. Therefore, it is our opportunity to agree the responsibilities of the lead member for Armed Forces and also to appoint to the role. And I'm pleased to say that Councillor Emma Baker has agreed to second this report and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Baker, if that's acceptable. It would seem logical to go to a vote on recommendations 1 to 2, and then to consider appointing a colleague for that role. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to take a vote on recommendations 1 and 2. Does anyone wish to speak on those 2 recommendations? Oh, Emma. Thank you.
Bless you, Ashley. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to speak in support of this recommendation that's here before you today. I work in a school that has a really popular CCF programme that comes on the back of a lot of parents and family members serving currently in the armed forces. So, yeah, the role to appoint a lead member for the armed forces is just so important, ensuring that the needs and the voices of the armed forces community are heard and supported across our district. So, given the district's Gold Award status under the Defence Employer Recognition Scheme, I really trust that the Council will choose a lead member today who will carry this responsibility with pride and dedication, and I strongly support the motion to approve the schedule, the role description and the appointment process today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. We're now going to vote on recommendations 1 and 2. On the buttons again, ladies and gentlemen, please, if you are in favour or against or want to abstain, can you press the button now? Thank you. That's 44 for, 3 abstentions. The motion is carried. Thank you. We now, ladies and gentlemen, move on to the final part, part 3. We need to appoint a member for the lead role of the armed forces. What I want to do, please, I will take a proposer and a seconder for a nomination. If there is more than one nomination, I will take a proposer and a seconder for that nomination, so on, depending on how many nominations we get. There will be no debate. There will just be nominations, and then we'll go to a vote. Can I get a nomination, please? Councillor Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I propose that Councillor Richard Dixon-Warren continues in the role. He's done an excellent job. I see no need to change.
Could I have a second of that nomination? Thank you, Councillor Gill. Do we have any more nominations? Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to nominate Bridget May for the post. Bridget is the child of a forces family. Her father served for almost 40 years. She has spent her entire adult life working in, supporting service personnel, whilst bringing up a family. Her husband recently retired after 38 years.
If I can interrupt, Councillor, I did say at the outset I just wanted a nomination and a seconder, and now I'm aware of the fact that you are speaking in favour of Councillor Lay, which I am not going to disagree with, but because I said I only wanted a nomination and a seconder, I'm going to ask you to sit down, please. And who seconds that nomination? Councillor Bishnow Singh. I'm now going to pass to... Sorry? Are there any more nominations? In that case, and for sensitivity, we will pass to Graham, who hopefully... Are you going to do the vote on this, Graham? Yes, Councillor.
To hear from both candidates so that we can base our vote on what they've got to say, please.
Sorry? Yeah. I don't see where not at all, so in alphabetical order I will take the point, and I think that is perfectly reasonable. Councillor Dixon-Warren, are you happy to stand and speak?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. The irony of previous comments about late notice, last minute, is not lost on me.
I was not expecting to speak on this. I didn't know that this was an item on this agenda until I read the agenda over the weekend. I was not forewarned. That said, I have been the Armed Forces Champion of SKDC since May 22. I was formally appointed in September 22 at my insistence. And since then, I have done everything I can to support the Council in its support for the Armed Forces Covenant. I have also taken on the additional responsibility of Chair of the Lincolnshire Armed Forces Community Covenant to fill a vacancy that I believe needed filling and that nobody else wanted to fill. And in that appointment, I have been given a perspective on being a district Armed Forces champion that has been extremely useful. And I'm now in the process of developing a strategy that will take support for the Armed Forces Covenant by this district forward for the next 2 years, because we face very interesting and difficult times. We've got 8,000 veterans in SKDC. We've got about 1,000 reserve and regular forces serving, and they are our priority. And with defence going up to 2.5%, we need to look very hard at how we support our armed forces, because most of us have members of the armed forces or veterans in our wards. We may not know who they are, but they are there, and it is our collective responsibility to make sure that the Covenant works for all of them as far as we possibly can. I've been doing this since 2022, beg your pardon. Thank you. And I feel that I have accumulated a reasonable expertise in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lay.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't expecting to speak either, so I can only tell you what I've done so far. As Councillor Moran was saying, I come from a forces background. My father was in the Army. I've been in the Air Force. My husband was in the Air Force, and I've worked with the SAFA, which is part of Soldiers, Sailors and Airmen's Families Association, as well as the MDHU, which is the medical unit that was at the hospital in Peterborough. And so I've worked with lots and lots of different levels of servicemen, supporting them with medical backgrounds, mental health, and also helping them to get benefits and into houses, both abroad and back here in the UK. I feel that I've got a lot to give to this role. I'm more than happy to do it, but I can only say that, you know, it's got to be the best person on the day that's going to be voted in, and I don't have really anything else to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. And can I thank both councillors for standing up and speaking as they just have. That was wished upon you. Thank you both. Just double checking I was doing this correctly. So in alphabetical order, could I have a show of hands for Councillor Dixon Warren, please? Raise your hands now. And for Councillor Lay? I'm abstaining. And I'm abstaining. Anyone else? I can announce that Councillor Lay has won that vote on 24 votes to Councillor Dixon Warren's 19. I would like to take this opportunity to publicly thank Councillor Dixon Warren for all his work he's done up until this moment in time. An absolutely true gentleman, and congratulations, Councillor Lay. Agenda item 11, got it right that time. This is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund allocation for 25-26, and the Council is recommended to approve the proposed interventions to form the basis of the South Kesteven UK SPF investment plan submission to the Greater Lincolnshire Mayoral Combined County Authority. 2. Delegate authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of the Council to finalise and submit the final investment plan to the Greater Lincolnshire Mayoral Combined County Authority. Who's proposing this one? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. Just in terms of the procedure, is it acceptable for me to put forward a motion that recommends delegating authority to the Chief Executive and me? That's fine with everybody. Good. So thank you, Chair. You've heard this morning from Father Craddock about the solar panels on top of St Wolfram's Church, which are great for Grantham, great for climate change and so on. They were paid for by the Shared Prosperity Fund, but the money has not all gone to Grantham, it's gone all around the district. I'm informed by the Cabinet Member for Leisure that the bases for table tennis tables across the district are going in as we speak or very soon afterwards, and we've had a lot of debate, and I thank Councillor Knowles for his chairmanship of the UK SPF board. A lot of rigorous and robust debate in that quarter, and we have given money out across to various different opportunities. Thank all the members of those committees. Thank also Emma Whittaker for putting together this report, and all those in her team that have been getting the money out of the door over the last 2 years or more. 3 years. So 3 years ago, the Council was awarded £3.9 million in funding for local investment. The Government announced there would be an additional or transitional year of UK Shared Prosperity funding. Unlike in previous years, this funding will be allocated to the Greater Lincolnshire Mayoral Combined Authority. That's devolution for you, rather than directly to South Kesteven. The leaders of Lincolnshire, North Lincolnshire and North East Lincolnshire, the upper tier authorities as they like to consider themselves, have written to the Council to confirm an intention to passport a share of the overall funding to each of the local authorities. This would mean that South Kesteven would receive £1.2 million in the forthcoming year, 25-26, and the final decision will be made at the inaugural meeting of the Combined Authority on the 6th of March. The Council has been asked to prepare a revision to the previous investment plan with the same usual notice that we get of these things to keep us on our toes, setting out how we wish to allocate the funds. The Combined Authority has clarified that any funding to South Kesteven should be fully committed by September 2025 to ensure all funding is used properly across Lincolnshire. So given the tight deadlines, this report is seeking a delegation to allow the Chief Executive, in consultation with me as leader, to approve the final investment plan submission based on the principles set out in the report in front of you. I hope you can join me in supporting the recommendations in the report, and I look for a seconder.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Knowles, thank you. I've got your name down, Councillor Kelly. Is your button pressed because you want to speak or not? Thank you. Does anyone want to speak or join debate? In that case, we will go straight to the vote on the buttons, ladies and gentlemen. If you're in favour of the motion, can you please press, or against or want to abstain, press your buttons now. $38 for, 8 abstentions, 1 against, 47. Thank you. The motion is passed. Yeah, we're taking 3 off the abstentions because people being absent from their seats. Thank you. We now pass on to agenda item 12, which is probably the most important motion we're discussing this afternoon and going forwards. This is a wonderful opportunity for all of us in the Chamber to make our opinions known, to give some opinion of what is going to happen. All we are for sure, certain of, in 2 years we will cease to exist. I would like 3 years, apparently. Ooh. I'll ask the CEO to give us information on that. Whatever, our time is numbered, and as I put in an email out to councillors, we need to work together, we need to be productive, and we all need to make sure we leave what has been a very important place to all of us and our communities, a worthwhile ending to what we do. So, in whichever order you wish to put your names in, we can now start discussing this motion, after Councillor Baxter has proposed it.
Thank you. I think the recommendations in this report should be uncontroversial in that we are asked to note the current position and we are asked to receive an interim proposal at next later meeting. However, this is an opportunity for people to share their views on local government reorganisation. The government has embarked upon a policy programme of local government reorganisation in two-tier areas. You will have seen that in the press, hopefully. Is it a point of order? Okay. The government aspires... So, the current two-tier system would replace county and district councils with another two-tier system of a mayoral authority and larger unitary councils. This is not devolution, this is the opposite of devolution. It's, whichever way you look at it, it's taking decision-making further away from local people. It will also result in fewer councillors, which means that we will be less accountable, I believe, to the people that we are to represent. Not just less accountable, less accessible. We will have larger workloads as councillors, those of us who go through to the next iteration of local government. It's the first local government shuffle for 50 years, as you know. So, at the start of February, the government wants the new unitaries to have target populations of £500,000. Where this figure derives from, if you were watching the parliamentary debate about it the other day, nobody still knows. It appears to have been plucked out of the air by ministers or civil servants, possibly based on recommendations from very large local authorities. So it's ridiculous. 500,000 people. Lincolnshire is in, I think, 1.2 million people altogether if you include the two unitaries at the top. So that would divide Lincolnshire into two. I don't think that's a... Well, I think that needs more thought, definitely. Realistically, an LGR proposal for a two-tier area would likely need to be pitching to a population approaching 500,000 or 400,000 or something similar. They are not going to allow Rutland to continue as a authority of, I think, 40,000 people. That isn't going to make the grade, whichever way you cut it. And nor would South Kesteven on its merits at the moment of 150. The government and the previous government want larger authorities. So they've asked us to put together our unitary proposals, having consulted our neighbours and our residents and so on, by the 21st of March 2025. So we got the first indication just before Christmas. We got the letter quite late on, and we're still being asked to meet the deadline of the 21st of March. What the government is asking for at this stage is an outline business case, described to a meeting of chief executives and the ministry the other day as a touching point. So we're putting together our proposals for replacing a 50-year-old system of local government and putting together our proposals by the 21st of March, but that's just kind of the first indication. The next indication would be the full business place, including public consultation, etc., for submission by November. The government has not given any indication as to when we would receive feedback on the initial thoughts. So, as far as we know at the moment, we will send a proposal or multiple proposals to the government on the 21st of March, and so will all our neighbours. So I think it's likely that there will at least be a proposal from the county council and proposals from district councils that will not align with each other. And then, as far as we know, we will receive no feedback on those proposals until November. But we have to work them up in between time. Hopefully, someone will spot the problem with that, because this is supposed to be about efficiency savings. Where these efficiency savings are coming from, nobody seems quite clear. So, the government wishes for LGR to be delivered by April 2028. That's the year after our next set of elections are due. In a scenario with competing proposals, the process by which the government will evaluate and decide has not been detailed. The decision at the end of the day will be made by the government. To be clear, an area can submit multiple competing proposals. Proposals can include councils outside the invitation letter and cross other public service boundaries. For example, to include Rutland in our case. But in such cases, strong justifications would be required. Similarly, if a district were to be split, either our district or some other district, we would have to put forward a strong justification for that, and the Boundary Commission would become involved, which is definitely not going to speed up the process. Councils will not be bound by the contents of an interim proposal on the 21st of March. It's not a decision point. The Chief Executive and myself are in conversations. I've had conversations today with other leaders and Chief Executives, well, me with leaders, the Chief Executive with other Chief Executives, regarding potential models and data sharing. You will see in the report that Karen and Charles James is particularly to be thanked in this case for putting together all the data in your report. It's a lovely ready reckoner of how big our authority is and where they are and so on. I have also circulated a survey to you asking for your preferences. This has been extremely useful for me to guide my discussions so far. If you haven't completed it yet, please take time to do so. I can tell you, resulting from my survey, of which I have had 25 responses, actually 26 responses. They include 7 members of the senior management team, and then they're about roughly 50-50 split between administration and SK Coalition. So we have a consensus on the authority that we want to work with least. Obviously, we continue in valued partnership with our neighbours in Peterborough, but we don't wish to be aligned with them in any kind of restructure. That was clear. The authority with whom we are most agreed that we need to work with is North Kesteven, working towards a restructure, going back to the old weapon takes and so on that Mark will explain to you, if you like. So North Kesteven came first. In second place were equal South Holland and Rutland. Further down the list were others. In terms of the people we don't want to work with, in terms of the people we don't want to work up a proposal with, Peterborough came first and was followed by East Lindsey, and then by Lincoln and Melton. Bizarrely, West Lindsey was kind of less objectionable than the ones I've mentioned so far. So, to sum up, the timeline we're working to, all member briefings on LGA to be delivered on 10th of March, you're all invited, an extraordinary meeting on the 18th of March, and this will be the most significant reform of local government since the 1970s, and it's imperative that in local government in South Lincolnshire we serve our residents, businesses and communities. At this stage, from my opinion, nothing's ruled in, nothing's ruled out. I welcome all the comments that you make, subject to one condition that I'll mention in a moment. It has to reflect, whatever comes out of this, it has to reflect the way people live their lives. So it has to be relevant to the people that currently live in our district and the other districts around. So from a personal level, it's no secret that I've spoken to the press about my preference for a three-way split of Lincolnshire with smaller authorities, and it's no secret that I've been speaking to Rutland as well as to our neighbouring authorities to see whether that's something we could be interested in. So, without saying too much more, I welcome your opinion. Chair, could I suggest that you ask Council's opinion about whether, given the time and given the likely number of people who want to participate in the debate, that we reduce the length of speeches from 5 minutes to 3 minutes? I don't know if that has any support from anywhere else.
So far, councillors putting the names down to speak reflects that we could go to the first 5, but I will take your view on it. Could you raise your hands if you feel like you want to cut the conversation down to 5? We will have to have a vote. 3. Those against that? I know, got to go to a vote. So, can I have a proposal for your motion to go down to 3 minutes, please? A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Crawford. All in favour of cutting to 3? That's carried. I was trying to cut it down and I made a right mess of it. So, we will go to Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Leader. I do support the work that you are doing and the Chief Executive is doing to respond to this madness. 4 years ago, I was privileged to be re-elected to the Lincolnshire County Council after I promised the people of Deeping St James and Langtoft I'd continue to fight Conservative plans to scrap local councils and create a gigantic Greater Lincolnshire Mayoral Authority, lumping us in with Scunthorpe, Grimsby and the South Humber ports. Despite the majority of residents who expressed a preference in every Lincolnshire district saying no thanks to that plan, the voices of the people we represent were overruled. I'm dismayed now that the new Labour government has launched a mad dash procedure to abolish all district councils, including this one, as well as Lincolnshire County Council. It's been described as moving from the two-tier system of local government to unitary authorities. It's nothing of the sort. They are scrapping the current two-tier system, but they're replacing it with a new two-tier system, with the mayoral authority being the upper tier, and with so-called local councils at least 3 times bigger than we are in South Kesteven. Despite all the promises over many years by both major political parties nationally, the latest plan will turn so-called devolution on its head and remove the meaning of the word local in local government, in my view. As I've said in my leaflets 4 years ago, I'll continue to fight for decisions to be taken closer to those whose lives they affect, not even further away. Although I appreciate I'm going to have to change the headline from Tory plan will make decisions more remote to Labour plan will make decisions more remote. Can I ask the Leader if he's aware of any evidence that suggests bigger and more remote councils may perform better and more efficiently than the current system? And can he also say what plans are in place to actually engage with our residents and ask them, who we represent, how they wish to be governed? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And rather going back to the Leader, which I won't do because I want to give councillors as much time to speak as they like, I realise formally I have to have a seconder for the proposal from Councillor Baxter. So could someone put your hand up and do that for me, please? Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Councillor Shorrock.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just close these down so I don't fuss too much. It was quite interesting, actually, that something's unbelievable. Sorry. Right. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, this is an interesting debate and it's an interesting discussion. I do note that the paper, all it really wants us to do is to note, what's going on, and then refer it to an extraordinary meeting. I will wait to find out from that deliberation for that extraordinary meeting before we make that decision. And I think that's incumbent on all of us, including the Leader, before he's making pronouncements, to the media about his preferred option. I think you need to be really careful, about doing things like that. We need to be deeply reflective about what's going on. We need to interrogate the evidence. There's a huge amount in this that speculative, and we've been here before, right? Sadly, under another Labour government, right, where they presented options around what they wanted to do in terms of district councils and district councils working together. However, that said, now I think we have to take the time out and reflect on this. I'm not quite sure where we get to in this particular discussion today, right, and how it informs where we go to at the extraordinary meeting. So I'm quite interested in going to the meeting beforehand in terms of a briefing and also the extraordinary meeting, yeah, and looking at what our options are going into that as well. What I would say, and agree with you, is that I agree with Councillor Dilks, we do need to find out what people think, right, constituents think in relation to this. Local government and the way local government is organised, right, is always a very hard thing to get people engaged on, right, as well. It's complex, right, and people aren't particularly interested, right, in who does what.
30 seconds, Councillor.
Yeah, and so, but I do think we need to try and do it, and we need to try and do it in different ways, rather than just putting out a survey. So we need to be looking at putting together kind of proper focus groups, proper meetings, where we're talking to people about it, yeah, to help inform that decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I probably wouldn't go as far as Councillor Dilks has called it to say it's mad, but it doesn't seem like a good idea to me. And that's probably because I sort of relate to unitary authorities as Nottingham and Birmingham, which have gone bankrupt. And I think when you form a larger unitary authority, you are moving further away from your population. Having said that, it seems like it's being forced on us, and so it's being forced on them. I think Councillor Baxter's right. You've got to make provision for it, haven't you? I did have a question for Councillor Baxter, though. I understood with the Lincolnshire Mayoral Authority, I thought we were almost constricted to within that area, rather than, I know you're talking to Rutland, that we have to form it almost within that area and not go outside that Lincolnshire Mayoral Authority. That's one question. The other question is, if we are going to split it up, you said you've been talking to North Kesteven. Can I assume, or would you confirm, you've been talking to Boston, South Holland, and I don't know about Lincoln? Thank you, that's all.
I'll ask him, if you've got an instant answer to that, Ashley, I will allow it, even though I didn't allow Councillor Dilks' question.
I've spoken to all the authorities. So, for example, last week, I think on Friday and Monday, I was in a room with most of the, I think on Friday it was the district leaders of across Lincolnshire, and earlier this week it was the district and the county, all the leaders across Lincolnshire, and there was an exchange of views and opinions. I've also had meetings with, the independent leader at Boston I speak to fairly frequently. I've been speaking to Gal Waller at Rutland to keep her up to date. I've spoken to South Holland, of course, and North Kesteven. With the Chief Executive and I went to have a conversation with Peterborough, because nothing's ruled in, nothing's ruled out. I've spoken to the guy from Melton, but the people that are closer to us and more likely to be part of the thing, I've obviously spoken to more. The first part of your question was about whether or not it can cross mayoral boundaries. You've all had the letter, and usually when we ask this question to the government, they say, read the letter again, especially on the 500,000. It's kind of ambiguous on the 500,000, but they say go back to the original text. As it happens, Rutland don't have a devolved mayoral authority, and so they're not breaching anything. And so I think there's a stronger case for... I'll ask the Chief Executive to confirm whether or not we can breach the mayoral boundaries, but in terms of Rutland, there is no devolved mayoral authority. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Paul.
Chief Exec.
Nothing like a hospital pass, is there? Yes, Yes, you can actually go outside of your boundary. There's one of the clauses in the white paper to say that you can look at possibilities. Rutland, as we know, are part of the local economic partnership, which has gone into the mayoral combined authority. When you go through local government reorganisation, you're also going to have to restate the structure for the mayoral combined authority, because at the present time, the mayoral combined authority with constituent members is 2 people from Lincolnshire, 2 people from North East Links and 2 people from North Links. And of course those organisations will not be anymore after local government reorganisation. So you already have to have an amended statutory instrument for your mayoral combined authority on the back of local government reorganisation. So there is a possibility, and we're saying possibility, that we would have to make the case if Rutland did want to come with us.
Thank you, Chief Exec. Councillor Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. SK is a well-run authority with considerable financial resources and a wide-ranging property portfolio, both freehold and leasehold. The only mention I can find about assets or the fate of them is on page 218, the penultimate paragraph, where it refers to the default position is that assets and liabilities remain locally managed by councils. Who will become the owners of SK's assets under these proposals?
Councillor Sawyer, that would be the new principal authority. So the mayoral combined authority would be the strategic authority, then the new unitary would, the assets and liabilities would transfer to the new organisation on vesting day. Well, it would be managed by the new authority. So all assets and liabilities that South Kesteven have would transfer to the new authority, along with other authorities that would transfer into that new organisation from April 2028.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Baker.
It's like many in this room, I stood in a local election for my local district council to amplify local voices. I stood on local issues and I was elected to champion those local issues. I am accountable to my local residents. At the very start, I knew that I would face those local residents again in 2027, where they could have a say on how well or otherwise they feel I have represented their views, their priorities, in their home, my home. And yet I am now in the position of undoing that accountability, of working to implement a change that Born Osterby did not vote for, and yet it changes how they are represented. A change that's going to take time, energy and oxygen out of the room when all my residents want is for their bins to be collected, social homes get built and local issues to be addressed. I didn't ask to be in this position. I'm sure nobody in this room welcomes the way this policy is being implemented. I am furious that the costs of this unrequested change, this imposed change, must be found from our assets and our reserves. I am furious that on a matter that is so important, the letters consistently and persistently arrived late. I wonder how it would be received if our plan arrived even a day late in Westminster. I'm furious that the deadline is so short that we are left with that looming ahead of us. Good governance takes time. It takes effort. It takes time to consult, to model, to plan. And we don't have that time. Following this vote, I'm going to do the only thing I think I can do, and that is make sure that my residents understand what this reorganisation means. That it is less representation, less accountability, less transparency, by an authority that will be further from the reason I entered local politics. Local people.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Whittington.
Thank you much indeed, Mr. Chairman. I think my concerns with these policies, the first one is the timetable. I think it's completely unrealistic to expect us to be able to have any full and meaningful consultation with local residents and get even an outline plan to government by the 18th of March. I don't think, Councillor Dilks, this is a Labour plan. I don't think it's a Conservative plan. I think it's a civil servants plan. And I think it's a civil servants plan because, and I think it's linked to local government funding. So the civil servants in Westminster seem to think that local government reorganisation will free up so much cost savings, it will fill the gap that we all know is there in local government funding. The reality is, it won't, because the savings are illusory. And if anybody wants proof of this, I circulated a few weeks ago, only to the Finance Committee, a report by the accounting firm Grant Thornton that had analysed 3 unitaries, Buckinghamshire being one of them, that had gone through this process of going from county and district to unitary. The savings that were supposed to happen didn't happen. Even 3 to 4 years later, these councils are still arguing over assets and liabilities and how the new balance sheet of the new authorities are made. There's all kinds of technical accounting stuff in there. But if you read through it, you will see that actually there's a tremendous amount of work involved. Now, it took the entirety of the Civil Service Department about 3-4 years working solely to get units to 3 authorities. I just don't think they've got the capacity of 12, 15, whatever the final number's going to be. They just haven't got the capacity to even hit a 2028 deadline. So this is really civil service driven to identify illusory savings so they don't have to give local government the money that we need, and actually we can deliver a lot better than civil servants up in Westminster. So that's behind it. In terms of configuration, I suspect that when it's all done and dusted, we might actually come back, and Councillor Baxter's alluded to this.
30 seconds, Councillor.
The pre-1974 position of Kesteven, Holland, and Lindsay. I think that is the way in which it's going to go. At the moment, I'm ambivalent as to what I think the final configuration is going to be, but I think it'll work out something like that. In terms of Rutland, I would just say exercise caution. Rutland is a high council tax, high cost, because it's only a 40,000 area. The cost of its services are very, very high, which is why its council tax is very, very high.
Wind up, please, Councillor.
Any authority taking on Rutland would, in effect, potentially be cross-subsidising residents in Rutland. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to be explained a little bit more about April 2028, because when I got elected for the second time in 2023 as a local district councillor, it was a formation of a contract between the council and myself for a given period of time, i.e. to May 2027. And if we all look at our car park passes, it says May 2027 on them. Now, I respect the government to make new laws, but it seems undemocratic to delay elections until beyond May 27. So, what are the thoughts on that, and is there an answer to it, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. There's a few points here. First of all, I think what the government's proposing is completely, it has been touched on, unreasonable and undemocratic. Even the thought of the extent of the change proposed will undoubtedly have an impact on our residents, ourselves as members, and also on the staff working for us on the front line in our council. My previous experience is actually in change management and business consultancy. Change costs money. You have to look at the entire infrastructure, how it's been designed. For example, just looking at IT, looking at the buildings and the use of the buildings, not to mention the actual staff within the buildings and the functions of those staff and how they will all work together. There is a great risk around this to our assets. Councillor Sawyer was right to ask that question, because we will have to start seriously looking at what buildings will and won't be needed. And that can have quite serious ramifications for the look and feel of literally our town centres. What non-statutory services do we value really highly as a local authority? Our parks, our leisure amenities. We mentioned earlier what's happened at Deepings regarding the swimming. What will happen to those non-statutory services, our libraries, for example? We will have to revisit our local plan, and within that work, which we already know how much work has gone into all of that, we've got to revisit that again, and we'll likely have to do it again in the context of a much larger authority. That then raises huge questions around housing. Where will the house building actually take? Are we going to end up with bonfires between the more rural areas and the towns, and where that housing will actually be allocated, around what resources? To me, there is an obvious A1 corridor which provides vital transport links between some of the authorities that we have referred to today. I think we can't ignore transport and the ability to get across to wherever it is that we have to be going in the future. Local knowledge is hugely important, and it's particularly important actually within the planning process. And even
30 seconds, Councillor.
Thank you. Even if we take into account, for example, at the moment, how far some people already have to travel just to come to a planning committee meeting, have their say. We can't let that go, and I do think that the government needs to reconsider, and the figure 500,000 is ludicrous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd like to invite the Chief Exec to answer the particular question that Councillor Turner raised. Karen?
Thank you, Chairman. Of course, there'll be more information that we'll be giving you on the 10th of March, coming along to the briefings in the afternoon and evening, which I'm sure I'll see all of you there. But if I can just give you a bit of a heads up on the election timeframe, there's already been postponements this year. Of course, there were some county elections postponed because they were put into the priority programme for devolution and LGR, so there has been some postponements this year. What we are thinking is going to happen is that they would go to shadow organisation elections in 2027. So when your end of your term comes and I take your car pass back off you, before of course I reissued, that there'd be a shadow election dependent on the size of the new strategic authority and the new level of elected members with new ward areas. So what you do is have a shadow election at that point for those elected members then to be in place in shadow for the April the 1st, 2028. This is still all yet to be determined. I think one of the things, I think it was Councillor Whittington said, was one of the big things is capacity here for the government. The government's capacity to deliver on what they've done previously with Buckinghamshire, North Yorkshire, Northamptonshire, the commissioners that are in a number of authorities. We do wonder where the capacity is going to come from to assist local authorities in this significant, biggest change, as Councillor Baxter says, in the last 50 years. So we will be working with our MHCLG colleagues over this next period of time, but it's got to get some more additional information needs to be forthcoming.
Thank you very much, Karen. Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I find myself in broad agreement with just about every other councillor that's spoken, to be fair. I particularly agree with Councillor Whittington's comments that this is very much civil service driven. I totally agree with that. However, I want to make clear again, as I have done various times in the past, there's no hypocrisy today from me in saying this, because I don't come here as an apologist for the Labour government on this or any other issue. And I've been making my own personal views on this so-called devolution agenda very clear for the last year or so. And I will continue to do that, obviously. This is not devolution. You know, this is clearly not devolution. Devolution, as has already been noted, and I've noted in the past, is passing down decisions to the lowest level possible. But I live in the real world, and this has been coming for some time. I lived in Humberside, South Humberside, Immingham, near Grimsby, in the mid-90s before I moved back here, which is my home town. They were getting rid of North and South Humberside at that very time, 95, 96. And devolution, or this version of devolution, has continued piecemeal, because that's what it's been, piecemeal, bits and pieces here and there, since. Another big example, Northamptonshire County Council, broken up, and now there's two Northamptonshire unitary authorities. So this is nothing new, and neither is postponing, because that's what's happening, not scrapping, postponing elections. That's nothing new. It's happened at various times over the last 20, 25 years. So with the greatest of respect, and I'm talking about what I'm seeing on social media, the squealing on that from the Reform Party, and to a lesser extent the Liberal Democrats, is absolute nonsense. There is clear precedent for this. Now, I read with slight ironic amusement the other day that Councillor Martin Hill, leader of LCC, he called Councillor Baxter's comments rubbish. I did think that that was a little bit rude. I wouldn't quite go that far.
30 seconds,
well,
Councillor.
thank you. But this is going to happen. We need to have an element of real politic about this. In the real world, it will be LCC and North and North East Lincolnshire unitary authorities that call the shots on that. Unless there is drastic change at County Hall on May the 1st, I live in the real world, I don't see that happening. The Tories have a massive majority. This is Lincolnshire.
Wind your comments up, please, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Chair. OK, it will be LCC and the unitaries calling the shots. I say, final comment, Chair, I say with absolute sincerity, please, leading Tory councillors, lobby your county councillors. Get them to see some sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bishna Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I agree with everything that has been said, and also as Councillor Steptoe just mentioned, it's going to happen. What I'm interested in knowing, I know we got a list of a number of other authorities or the district council in here that probably will all amalgamate together in a way to have this number, arbitrary number that have been given, 500,000 or 400,000 or 350,000 populations. What I would like to know, probably everybody else, probably everybody else, I have just make a note here of people that most likely probably might get this 400,000 population from. North Kesteven, South Kesteven, Rutland and South Holland. That, adding it up, come to around about 405,519. Probably we're just in keeping. What I would like to know, or probably everybody would like to know, what is the benefit and against working with each of these councils for us? Because I think we are fairly in a healthy position to it. And are there any detriment in joining any of the other councils in there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The actual recommendation is that the part of it, number 2, is the Council agrees to receive an interim proposal, which is what we have just been talking about. So I'd just like to invite Councillor Baxter to finish off. My colleague's button didn't come up, so I am going to allow him to speak. It's my and his confusion. Councillor.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll be reasonably brief. I'll probably save some of my comments for the next meeting. South Kesteven District Council, well, it's been nice while it's lasted. It's worked extremely well whilst it's lasted. And I say, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. So I'm really saddened by this local government restructuring. There's lots of questions still to be answered, but the first question, obviously, is until we know how many people, whether it's 500,000, 350,000 or whatever, we're going to have a job to know who we need to negotiate with. We don't know where the boundaries are going to be. So they need to come up with that figure for us. There's lots of questions to be answered, financial questions to be answered. I mean, we've got reserves and investments. Those reserves and investments, they belong to our people. It's their money, it's their investments, and we've been served well by good financial officers in the past, Chris Farmer, John Blair, and Richard Wiles. You know, so, and talking about our staff, we need to fight their corner as well. You know, we've got some fabulous staff, and I say we need to safeguard their futures. Maybe there's some that look forward to early retirement, but you know, that's probably just fit a few of them, but we need to safeguard our staff, fight their corner for them. There's going to be rebranding, isn't there? The costs of moving to a bigger authority, a lot of rebranding there, and the costs of it totally. Well, what is the cost going to be? And also, I say, I'll just briefly finish on this note. I think if it is myself as the next chairman of this council, you know, there's going to be relationships to build with the people that we're going to be joining with. Let's build those connections. It's going to be a really, really important job there, you know, to build those relationships. So I'll keep further comments for the next meeting, but yeah, I am really, really saddened by this. I am, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Apologising for missing you. Councillor Baxter, would you like to sum up, and then we'll have to vote to accept it?
Or reject it, surely.
I've always been an optimist, Councillor. Off you go.
I hope you will agree to note the report and accept another report. Some of the comments that have been made, in terms of the numbers, the government have been repeatedly asked to explain the 500,000 and repeatedly refused to do so. They've been repeatedly asked, well, what if it's not 500, what's acceptable? And repeatedly refused to do so. So I think the best we can do is to go forward with the solution that we think is best, notwithstanding what's likely to be acceptable. It has been said by the government, various ministers, that lower than 500,000 is acceptable if there is a reasonable case for doing that. And I think that in rural Lincolnshire, where we have a relatively sparse population, there's a good argument to say that one end of the new authority is a very, very long way from the other. And I say that as a person, with the possible exception of Councillor Dilks, that lives furthest away from this council chamber and has to drive the best part of 50, in fact over 50 miles to come to a meeting. So as for the resources, yes, Councillor Sawyer, it's an absolute minefield. They haven't done the thinking. There was a conversation that I had with the leader at North Kesteven where Lincoln were kind of saying, well, we'd like to be a greater Lincoln authority, so take in the sort of hinterlands of Lincoln, North Hykeham and the other way. The numbers on Greater Lincoln don't add up. Just they can't get anywhere near 300,000, let alone 500,000. But if you looked at saying, well, let's slice off North Hykeham from the rest of North Kesteven, just asking about the HRA account is complicated because there's debt involved, there's houses involved, there's tenants involved. Absolute nightmare. So it's going to be administratively, I can't say it, it's going to be easier for the government to keep the building blocks of district councils together, intact. Maybe at a later date they can look at what refinements they can add, which might include Deeping Gate, to reunite the Deepings after all these many years. Deeping Gate, if you don't know, is in Peterborough. As for the council tax, I can't remember who said about the cost of living in Rutland. I've just done a little bit of research about the council tax. Our council tax is the lowest out of the four that were mentioned: North Case, South Cay, South Holland and Rutland. Ours is the lowest. It's difficult because Rutland is a county. You're not quite comparing apples with apples. Ours is roughly 1815 for county and district services, and Rutland is 2113. But if ever there were economies of scale to be had, it would be in the changes to adult social care and children's services. It's obviously going to be easier in a county of 1 million compared to a county of 40,000. That there's going to be an imbalance. But yeah, you're right. You're right that we should look at those figures. We are very slightly lower than North Cay. But I would imagine that those disparities between council tax will be levelled out over a period of time. We had a meeting with people from Northamptonshire, the Cabinet and SMT did, which was quite revelatory, because I remember that being quite a long time ago, when Northamptonshire went bankrupt and it was split into two different authorities. They are still going through the merger. So with regard to planning, and a very good point, Charmaine, about the planning needs to be relatively local, assuming that the government don't snatch all planning authority away from us completely and take councils out of the process. In Northamptonshire, they still have kind of local, they have a planning north and a planning south and a planning east and a planning, and goodness knows how many planning committees. I don't know whether they all have the same chair, who has to go through all of them, or whether it's done more pragmatically. I don't know. But yeah, so lots of the detail, I want to know it too. But thank you for those of you that have participated in the debate and told me roughly what your thoughts are. If you want to tell me outside the meeting, please do. But we will continue, myself and the Chief Executive and the Cabinet and the whole team, to work up what we believe is best for the people who currently live in South Kesteven, and we thank you for all your input too. That's me, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for your hard work on behalf of all of us. We do have to vote to officially accept what we have just done, so could you raise your hands, please, if you're in favour of accepting this interim report? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. I have to continue with the agenda until we have done 3 hours. The next agenda item is questions from colleagues. If there are no questions, I will close the meeting. If you have got a question, can you please register that now? Councillor Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. A question, if I may, to our leader. Ashley, what can we do so that we never again waste tens of thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money on investigating social media posts because a few councillors are mildly offended? I do, of course, accept from that any threats of violence, but with that exception, the question stands.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I'm disappointed that so much money was spent over so many complaints. I did in June invite people to come and sit in a room and talk it out like adults, yes. And I'm sorry that those overtures were rejected at the time. People get very sensitive. It's very difficult to let go. It's very difficult to apologise. It's very difficult to when you feel affronted. Having said that, I'm determined to work with Councillor Bird as Chair of the Standards Committee, Councillor Trotter and the Standards Committee, and of course the Monitoring Officer and Chief Executive, to try and find a fix to the standards process so that people have to at least engage in a conversation with the person that they deem to have offended them under normal circumstances. I think a lot of this could be sorted out with an old-fashioned conversation, and I think that might be, and I'm not making policy as I speak, it's not down to me to fix the standards process. The standards process was agreed by the standards committee, and remember that before this administration we didn't have a standards process or a standards committee for that sake. So I would prefer a system where before, if members of the public are involved, that's a slightly different thing. But if it's councillors moaning about other councillors or being offended by other councillors, then I think there is a role for either the chair of the standards committee or the monitoring officer or the chief executive to bash heads together first before we go getting tens of thousands of pounds of legal fees to tell us the bleeding obvious.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is also directed at Councillor Baxter, and it's on a slightly lighter and more jovial note. I hope that, Councillor Baxter, would you join me in congratulating Councillor Crawford on a very successful charity bingo event last week, raising a huge amount of money for local charities and putting another cherry on top of an excellent round of mayoral charity events run this year?
Councillor Baxter.
I would be happy to congratulate Councillor Crawford for all her fundraising during the year, particularly on the clickety-click, Legs 11, Kelly's Eye, bingo night. I don't know how much money was raised. I don't know how much money was won. Over £1,000, and it's laudable. Obviously, I'm grateful to Helen for the work that she does in her communities, but also the other town council mayors and parish councillors and town councillors across the district who don't get paid for doing that part of public service. The public service of our district and parish councils is astonishing, really. Why would you bearing in mind the previous question and where that was coming from, why would you put yourself through it? Why would you put yourself up for election when you know you're going to get the brickbats and sticks? So be nice to each other and support your local community events, especially if they're organised by your town council and your parish council.
I'm inclined to say bingo, but I will invite Councillor Mills instead.
Oh, apologies. This isn't meant to be a political question, but it is to Councillor Knowles as Cabinet Member for Corporate Governance. Recognising the ongoing threat to Ukraine and Europe and the government's belated recognition of the need to bring forward an increase in the defence budget, it would seem appropriate to reconsider the self-inflicted impact of our so-called ethical investment strategy, introduced at full council without committee scrutiny, not only to improve our investment outcomes, but to support growth of our defence industries. What plans, if any, do you have to do this at the earliest opportunity? And if not, why not?
Councillor Knowles.
Sentence, please.
I'm sure Councillor Mills will.
What plans, if any, do you have to do this at the earliest opportunity? And change our ethical investment strategy to allow us to invest in defence industries? And if you're not, why not? Thank you.
Councillor Knowles.
Yes, thank you. I don't feel inclined to comment on national policies. I don't think we have in this room space to look at all our national policies and ethical policies right across the board. I would recognise that the government has now decided, after a while, to increase defence expenditure, and recognise that in order to do that they are other expenditure which some of us would agree with and some of us would find difficult to accept.
Just a point, sorry, Councillor. I cannot resist a point of information.
Councillor.
Because that was a political question. Nakedly political. This government has been in power for 8 months. 8 months. Fact.
Could you complete your answer, please, Councillor Knowles, and we'll
trying
move
to
on.
avoid any suggestion of political comment from either side on a national basis. I recognise that there are dilemmas now and that will concern us all on a personal basis and on a political basis wherever we sit in that. But the difficulties of the present time are perhaps greater at this stage than they have been in many, many years on a national basis. If there are any ways in which people here in this building can comment and help in order to think of the ways in which we as SKDC can contribute to any development of whatever else, ethical or otherwise, then I'm sure we'd all be glad to hear it and we could take it through the appropriate committee. But I'm not prepared to sort of comment now on the ethical basis of what we do or what we do nationally or whatever.
I'd like to bring Richard Wiles in now, who's going to provide us with some information.
Just
Is it a point of order, Councillor Dilks?
Point of information, if I may.
Sorry, Richard.
A point of information. It was a political question, but the point of information is the last. It was noted, part of the question was said that the current government has belatedly recognised the need to increase military spending to 2.5. The last time any government reached 2.5 of military spending was a Labour government. That is a fact.
Richard, thank you.
Okay, sorry. If it helps the debate, the Council has approved an ethical investment strategy statement this afternoon as part of the Treasury strategy. So Appendix F of the budget report this afternoon sets out an ethical investment statement that this Council has now adopted, and that's in line with SIFA guidance. So thank you.
Before we carry on, I'd just like to remind you of what I should have read before we actually started this session. I expect you to put your question straight away. If you do not, I will direct you to move to your next question. There's no right to reply or making of statements or entering into debate. It is a question, we require an answer. Once the question is put and the answer is being given, we will move to the next question. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. At the moment, there are two public consultations taking place directly relating to Grantham Hospital. First is regarding the future of the old building, landmark building, which is a great...
I don't want to interrupt, Councillor, but who's the question to, and can you get to the question, please?
Yeah, this question was to Councillor Cleaver, but in his absence, Councillor Baxter's kindly volunteered to do his best.
Thank you.
Thank you. The first consultation is regarding the future of the old building, and the second is regarding the closure, permanent closure of the dementia ward. Will you join me in urging all members to take part and look at those consultations, and please put your opinions forward. Thank you.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you for bringing all councillors' attention to these two public consultations about the old building and the dementia ward. Nobody can question your campaigns over many years, Charmaine, to support health services in Grantham and beyond, and that also includes your participation in the LCC Health Scrutiny Committee. I'd urge everybody to if they care about health services in Grantham, to look at these two consultations and participate and tell your truth. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm the last question, actually. But I just wanted to take a moment to echo the comments made during communications today. This is a question to Councillor Virginia Moran about all of the hard work done by the community interest group in the Deepings, and particularly Councillor Moran. I have run a community group, and I know how hard it is to motivate volunteers, to the late night phone calls, the meetings, the conversations, the repeated conversations. I just want to cross-party recognise all of the hard work that went into that. It didn't work out, but I do want to recognise in a cross-party nature and echo the comments made early on. There was no question in there, you'll notice, but I do just want to echo those comments.
Councillor Gill did warn me he was going to do that. Thank you, Councillor Gill. And that is... Oh, have you got a question, Councillor Moran?
No, I was just going to respond and say thank you very much, but I wasn't actually acting as a councillor at that time.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'm aware that our monitoring officer is keeping a very close eye on me as regards this.
Thank you, Councillor, and I also would like to echo, and I'm sure the Chamber does, thank you and your committee for all the hard work you did. Well done and thank you. Before I bring the meeting to a close, I'd just like to remind you that I do have a function coming up, the Chairman's Civic Dinner. I would like to totally underline the fact that I have not joined Lord Sugar's apprentice. We are not cutting fees because nobody's coming. In fact, the tickets are on the way to being sold out, so if you can come, it would be lovely to see you. I will not be offended if you can't, but can I ask you to get your tickets quickly, because Bourne Corn Exchange being what it is, when you reach a certain number, it does not get comfortable. Thank you for your time today. I am now officially ending the meeting, but again, you can't go till I do. I do apologise.
Please be